Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, August 19th, 2024. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for Maryland Department of Health's Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to today's Positive Behavior Supports Organization-wide Positive Behavior Support, what it is and how to get involved. On the panel today, we have Jennifer Jeffrey Pearsall with Shepherd Pratt. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options to hear the webinar, by computer and phone. And if you look at the panel interface labeled audio, you can click computer or phone to switch for the best option. We are recording the webinar and posting the session on YouTube and the DDA website. Today's PowerPoint has been uploaded as an attachment and is available for you to download in the webinar panel box. If you are listening by phone, you can request that it be emailed. Questions can be typed in the question or chat box in the webinar panel, and we will get to those towards the end of the presentation. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Jeffrey Pearsall. Good morning.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Donna, for handing this off, and welcome to everybody who is joining us today. And if you're listening to this in a recorded fashion, then welcome to you as well. We're excited to have folks here to learn more about organization-wide positive behavior support with the Maryland DDA. What we want to do today is take some time to just do some brief introductions. So we know who is with us today, and you know a little bit about us. And then we, pardon me, we'll go through an overview of positive behavior support, share a few examples from the field, and then talk about some details on how to get involved with positive behavior support with the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration, and leave time for some opportunities for questions and answers along the way. There will be an additional webinar coming up, so there will be also an opportunity for us to go over a little bit more information about getting involved with positive behavior support with the DDA. But if you have questions, feel free to put them in the questions section in the GoToWebinar, and we will address those towards the end of the session. All right, next slide. The work that is being done here is through a statewide partnership, and I'll share a little bit of that history in a few minutes, but I'll give you an idea who the partners are. We have some on the panel today and some who are also in attendance. The work here started through the Maryland Department of Health Developmental Disabilities Administration, really taking the lead and spearheading the vision to invest in organization-wide positive behavior support in Maryland through a statewide model. And that partnership, they have brought in some, over the years, experts from the University of Minnesota. They are a university of excellence in the field of positive behavior support. And so they are one of the partners that has been engaged with this work for many, many years, and serve as a consultant as support for this work. Shepherd Pratt is an additional partner, and that's where I am from. And we are a statewide training and technical assistance center for positive behavior support. And that's our role in the partnership. And the University of Maryland Eastern Shore is another partner in this work. And they also are venturing into the training and technical assistance arm of this work, as well as thinking about that pre-service training at the university level. So those are the partners in this work. What I would like to do is move into some introductions and give you a chance to type into the questions or the chat area, I guess, if we can move to the next slide. We could talk through or type through actually who we have here today. And I see names here, but if you could take a moment and the next click will give some directions on this, but to put into the questions and answer section here in the GoToWebinar, your name, the organization that you are representing, or other agency, and your role within that organization into chat or into the questions section. That would be great. And Donna, if you click one more time, I think that should appear, that prompt should appear on the screen. There you go. Perfect. And so actually there's a chat section here, so you can certainly use the chat to type in your name, your organization, and your role within that organization. It'll give us an opportunity for those on live to be able to kind of see who is here. And I will put my information in there. Like I said, I'm with Shepherd Pratt. I am a training and technical assistance provider for positive behavior support. And I've been engaged with this work for approximately 23 years and worked in a variety of different settings. And Terrence and Kira and Kiana, I don't know if you want to take a moment just to say hello to folks here.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Terrence Proctor. I'm the statewide coordinator for clinical services. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. It's very encouraging. So thank you.
All right, Kyra or Kiana?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kyra Crafton. I'm the regional coordinator for the Central Maryland region. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kiana Ward. I am the regional coordinator for Southern Maryland, the DDA.
I think we also have Dr. Meg on here.
Perfect.
Yes, I'm here. Finally, I got in. Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Meg DePasquale, Director of Clinical Services. I am so happy to have everybody on this call and so happy to have Jen sharing with us all about positive behavior support. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Perfect, thank you. So we do some introductions for some of the team here. But feel free, again, in chats, if you would like to share your information, just your name, your organization, and your role. That would be typically a fun way for folks who are joining live to see where we have views represented here, where we're seeing where folks are coming from across the state. All right, and you can do that as we move forward with the content. So if you want to go to the next slide, that would be great. All right, so I'm going to move into now an overview of positive behavior support before we get into the specifics on how to get involved with Maryland. So the next slide. Positive behavior support is an approach and a framework for thinking through how we organize systems to really to put in strategies and ways of work that help promote the respectful delivery of those practices that really support the dignity of individuals. There is a strong focus on creating contexts that are supportive and that really build on social and other functional competencies of the individuals that we support. There is a strong focus, and I'll share this in a bit of a visual format. There is a strong focus on the use of prevention strategies to think through how do we organize our environments to really create and foster a context that is making sure that we're thinking through how do we create success and engage in interactions that are focused on promoting success, and prevention is the critical element of that. Along with that focus on prevention, there is a progression of assessment and intervention as needs get more challenging, and there's a data-informed process for decision making. The whole premise here, when we think about practices and how we organize our systems to support the individuals that we're working with, is that we utilize those evidence-based strategies or promising practices that we think about how do we apply those throughout the system and across the continuum of need. And there is a real strong multi-tiered focus in the organization-wide positive behavior support work. I think some of the big things to think through here are how do we think through how we leverage positive behavior support to be able to create those positive, consistent, safe, and predictable and equitable environments in order to enhance an individual's quality of life and prevent challenging behaviors from either occurring or becoming more intense and frequent. Next slide. So oftentimes when we think about positive behavior support in our field, there is our minds typically go to the individual positive support plans and individual planning, and that is a big part of this this continuum of supports. When we're talking through organization-wide positive behavior support, it's thinking through how do we, take the principles of positive behavior support, and this is how the field has really evolved, and how do we take the principles of positive behavior support, the things that we know are really successful and helpful when thinking through how do we support individuals, and how do we apply that to our organization or the larger system, so that we're pulling from those elements, we're pulling from those best practices that we know and applying them across the environment. So we're creating strong and supportive environments. What this was pulled from is a public health model. If we can take what we know works really well with the individual and apply it to a systems level, we can invest more in prevention and intervention and create environments that can prevent the escalation of challenging behavior and then further help promote the quality of life that individuals have identified as their priorities and their goals. When we think through a positive behavior support organization-wide logic, we're thinking through a framework that helps us use data in a way and information that helps support teams identify how to allocate resources to support staff. So we look through data and to tell us a story, or information to tell us a story about where is it that we need to help support our staff through training, additional training and supports. The other thing that we use data to do with that organization-wide thinking is what different supports are needed by the people that we are supporting. And this really helps them work more efficiently and think through a focus of alignment through different as well. So the next slide would be great. All right. This is where we talk through that public health model, all right? Within that public health model, we think through what are some of the supports that we provide for all individuals, for some individuals, and for few individuals. And this is, one of the things that we can think through is like a public health model for oral hygiene, and knowing that, if we have insurance that is accessible and we have the practice of going and getting your teeth cleaned every 6 months, that's really kind of that public health universal, what is shared for all as best practice. And then we know that if we still do that. If we go to the dentist and you know, you're supposed to brush your teeth twice a day and floss, those oral hygiene best practices that we know if we put into place will prevent additional challenges and problems with our teeth. If even though that some, you know, even when we go to the dentist on a regular basis, we floss, we brush, etc., you know, we might have a cavity that comes up every now and then. And that would be that kind of yellow tiered additional support, that even though we still have that base of prevention in place, sometimes individuals are going to need some additional support for that oral hygiene. And then even when we're doing that, and you have some, you know, you may have a cavity here and there, you know, perhaps like a root canal pops up or something more intense with your oral hygiene needs. The idea is here we're doing is investing in prevention in order to decrease the amount of folks that need those additional intensive supports. If you can probably click twice, there will be 2 visuals that appear on this slide. There we go. Like I had mentioned, our minds typically go to those individualized planning mechanisms of positive behavior support when we think of positive behavior support. And that's true. You're working with individuals that have a high level of need, but we can still think through the organization system as needing and benefiting from this logic of how do we think about that ourselves, our environment, the organization, all of the people we support, the programs that you offer, and how do we think about investing in those core practices. So if you can click one more time, that would be great. And that's where we start with an organization-wide positive behavior support. We're not ignoring the fact that there's the tier 3 individualized planning going on, and we have mechanisms to support that. When we work with organizations that come into this model that the state has developed, this cohort model, there's the focus on tier 1 and really shoring up that foundation to decrease the need for tier 2 and tier 3 supports, not getting rid of tier 2 and tier 3 supports by any means. There's a strong focus on how do you enhance tier 2 and tier 3 supports as well. But it's this process of investing in the core system, in those tier 1, all settings, all systems supports, that's really helpful in creating environments where those individual plans can be more successful. You know, if we're working with a family in homes, then it's looking at what is the home environment and how is that functioning at that tier 1 universal level, and what strategies and supports can we help add into that environment so that the individual plan for the individual in that home is more successful, because that environment is kind of practicing the elements that mirror that plan. All right, the next slide. The other thing with organization-wide thinking, and this was referenced in one of the first slides around positive behavior support, is that we're creating these predictable, positive, safe, consistent, and equitable environments. If you can click one more time, that would be great. You know, I want you to think through, you know, what are the different environments in your organization? You know, where do you provide supports? What are your where are your supports coming in, and what are the different environments that that you're thinking about when you come to this with this overview? And you know, and are there what are the things that you're already doing that are really tapping into being able to create these predictable, positive, safe, and consistent and equitable environments? It's a framework, and thinking about how do we integrate use this framework and a way of thinking through how we use information and data to help align and integrate the different efforts that you're already engaged in order to continue to help create these types of environments. Again, this is it's an idea of working smarter, not harder. It's not that you're coming in with something like PBS isn't asking you to come in with something brand new and replace the things that you're already doing. PBS is a way of, it's a framework that organizations find helpful in thinking through what is it that we're already doing and what is working well, what isn't working so well, and how can we do things in a more cohesive way so that you're using your resources better to support your staff in order for them to best support the individuals that you're supporting. Can you go to the next slide, please? All right. And click one more time. Again, sorry. Oh, all right. I want to think through, like, you had a moment to think through what your practices already are in your systems. And I wanted to pick one that I know that most, if not all systems have really started to, or have been for a long time, leveraging to support the people that you're working with. And that is the trauma-informed support. And I pulled some experts from Karen Harvey's trauma-informed support for people with intellectual disabilities that was provided for the Maryland DDA. And I pulled some terms, I pulled some concepts that illustrate, I think do a great job of illustrating the alignment here. And that is the notion of empathy, respect, and support. And those are things that within the universal or the organization-wide tier 1 work that we engage in with organizations is there's a lot of effort on how do we create environments where staff are showing respect, support, and empathy towards each other, as well as, and specifically with the people that are supported, right? Understanding how life influences, experience influence the function of behavior. And so we talk a lot about the function of behavior across all tiers of support and understanding the life experience influence is critical in that element. I've talked about creating those safe, predictable environments. And a lot of times when I show that predictable, consistent, safe, and equitable visual, folks will automatically think that really sounds trauma-informed to me. And then making sure that you are responding to individuals through a trauma-informed lens. We talk a lot about how do we respond to individuals when challenges occur within positive behavior support. And taking that trauma-informed lens is critical. And then again, those ingredients necessary for post-traumatic recovery, thinking through creating like having safe environments and connection and empowerment are critical. We can go to the next slide, that would be great. And you can just click away a few times because some things will come up here like quality assurance, person-centered approaches. You can keep clicking, I let you know how many times. Your MANT training, positive behavior support, there should be 2 more, trauma-informed support, and diversity, equity, inclusion. So these are all of those elements that come together and have some connection to this vision and goal of creating positive, predictable, safe, consistent, and equitable environments. When we work with teams through this model in Maryland and in other states, these are the conversations we have at the organization level is, what are you already invested in? And how does this all work together? Again, it's working smarter, not harder. And, so we talk through, we talk through this and we do a lot of planning around this. Next slide, please. All right, the other element here, I showed you a triangle that talks through the the continuum supports. This is another element here, and this is kind of the way of work that we think through with positive behavior support. And this will probably resonate with other ways of making decisions that you have within your organizations. Within the positive behavior support, this is almost like a decision-making model where the outcomes are identified, whether it's for an individual or for a program within your organization or the organization as a whole. And we use information or data to help identify those outcomes. Where are the needs? Where are the areas of growth? What are the goals that we're trying to achieve? And then when we understand what those outcomes are, then we can select the practices. So what are the things, what are the ingredients that we need to put into place in order for us to achieve those outcomes? What are the supports that the individuals that we're working with, if we're talking about individualized planning, need in order to achieve the outcomes in their positive support plans? What do we need to put in place as an organization to create an environment that is person-centered, that is culturally inclusive and responsive? How do we create an environment across all of our programs that is trauma-informed and respectful in all of those valued outcomes that you have as an organization? These are conversations in planning and action, not just conversations, but we engage in action planning around this. And then finally, there are the systems that need to be addressed in order to, how do we put these practices into place, and how do we really support staff in making sure that they're able to implement the practices with high degrees of fidelity, making sure that we're supporting the cultural knowledge and inclusivity of staff behavior along the way. And if you can click again, it'll show some examples of what those systems are. So when we talk about systems, we do a lot of action planning around what are the organization-wide systems that will help your staff implement those practices with the highest degree of fidelity in order to really achieve those desired outcomes, whether it's with individual behavior support or positive support plans, if it's at the organization level or the program level. So how is your teaming already established? And I'll talk about teaming in a moment. What kind of training systems do you have in place? And how do you integrate this information into your existing training systems? Or what do you need to add to your training systems? What kind of coaching and feedback is provided from perhaps a house manager or home manager to the staff that are there on a daily basis? How do you evaluate how well things are being implemented? And then how do you evaluate outcomes? So we spend a lot of time on this way of work and how you think through and make decisions. All right, next slide, please. When we talk about systems, there's a lot of how do we support staff, and I want to note here that when we think through positive support plans, whether it's individual or organization-wide plans, it requires that those supporting the adults and children need to change their own behavior in order to make sure that those practices are put into place, whether it's person-centered practices or trauma-informed practices, or the individualized plan practices. So thinking through, how do you onboard staff? How do you continue to support staff along the way? Can I, next slide, please. And I pulled this from the Minnesota partner who's been engaged with this work in Minnesota for many years now, for probably about 8 years or so. And we often talk about positive behavior support is not used to, quote, fix people. It's a strategy for changing how we support each other and encourage positive social interactions. And there's a quote from somebody who was involved in this work as they went through the organization-wide positive behavior support training and support. They have this quote of, can't change anyone else, but people do change in relationship to your change. So all relationships are a system, and when any one part of a system changes, it affects the other part. All right, and next slide, please. So when we think through universal positive behavior support, this is what PBS looks like. So, this is what we would be working with you all on, is thinking through this tier 1 work. How do we create predictable and positive and proactive settings through creating common language and routines, identifying what those routines are? How do we teach and prompt communication and positive social skills? How do we acknowledge and recognize the positive social behaviors of the individuals that we support as well as our staff? What are the ways that we can respond to challenging situations that are proactive and function-based and trauma-informed, as well as thinking through your teaming process and emphasis on using data for decisions? All right, next slide, please. This is an example of a tier 1 system of creating a common language. This is from the ARC of Northern Chesapeake when they first started doing this work, where they identified like 3 to 5 core values for their organization. They decided on accountability, reliability, and commitment. This is a process that organizations go through and they can align with existing pillars that you might have. And then this was an example of creating this common understanding of routines and values for staff in a home. And so they met as a team with all of the staff who were supporting 2 roommates in a home. And they went through the different routines. This is an example of the transportation routine, medication time routine, and shift change. And then they identified, what does it look like to be accountable during medication time? What does it look like to show commitment during transportation? And the staff really put all of this content in here. It was a brainstorming session, but the things that you can see in here are that they've identified the 3 core values, some routines, and then they've defined what it looks like. So there's a lot of, it helps create that consistency in staff and how staff engage during their shifts, which then creates consistency for the roommates in this situation or people that are supported. This is one of those activities that that we go through with the organization-wide teams to help to kind of teach and the process of developing these. And this was developed by some of the team members that were in that initial training for positive behavior support through this work at the ARC of Northern Chesapeake. They facilitated this conversation. Next slide, please. This is an example from Minnesota, and just another example of what this could look like. You can see that there are, on the left-hand side, there are 4 values, and this is, again, an example from roommates. And the staff and the roommates work together. The staff helped facilitate this conversation. The roommates provided all of the information to identify the values that they had for their home and the different routines that they had in their home. And what does it look like? So what does it look like to be helpful during meal prep or cleaning up after dinner? Again, it creates that consistency. It also creates a way for staff to be able to communicate in a proactive way with the people that they're supporting before routines, as a reminder of what the shared agreements were. And then also a way to really acknowledge and build up those positive social interactions. All right, the next slide, please. All right, after that language, those values are identified within an organization-wide approach, it's really helpful then to also explicitly practice those behaviors, those social interactions, strategies and skills. And we have, through the University of Minnesota, I have worked with them, and we've created this, this is an example of a skill building plan, but just an example here of having some kind of structured process for staff to be able to really understand what are the norms and values and routines within the settings that they're working in and with the people they're supporting. And they have resources to go to and pull from in order to support themselves in supporting the expectations for that environment, for that home, for that employment setting, for that you know, summer camp, whatever it is that they're supporting. This is an example of not just a practice that can help support the individuals that you're supporting, but it can also be an example of a system of having a resource available to help staff. All right, next slide. The next process within that universal system is creating a process to acknowledge and recognize the individuals that you're working with, as well as the staff within your setting. And so what we know is that if we focus more on the things that we want to see, then they will grow, right? Whatever you focus on, whatever you feed will grow. And so it's kind of shifting our mindset to really focus on those positive social interactions instead of focusing on the challenges that could occur. And we know that when we shift our focus and focus more on those positive social interactions, that we're more inclined to promote relationship building, improvements in climate, impact in staff satisfaction, and also quality of life of the individuals that we support. All right, next slide. The first place that we start is promoting those positive social interactions, and our language, our words are one way to do this, and it's providing more focus on those verbal positive social interactions, sometimes referred to as praise, than corrections. And you know, as human nature would indicate that we'd be better at this than we are, but oftentimes we find that this is not in balance, that sometimes the corrections outweigh the positive interactions that we have with people. This research comes out of the Gottman Institute and is really focused on more, it started through relationship research, but has moved its way into the employment sector and working with personnel, as well as we do a lot of this work in school settings and trying to promote those more positive social interactions. And so we'll talk through strategies of how do you help support yourselves and staff in focusing more on those praise statements or positive social interactions, and have a higher balance of those than focusing on correcting any challenging behaviors that occur. One example that I often share when working with teams is, you know, for myself, even in my home, I do this. You know, I have done this work for 23 years, and I don't always hit this praise to correction ratio. And there are certain times in my day and my routine where it's harder. And those are typically in the morning before, you know, getting kids to school and going to work, and at the end of the day. And so it can be helpful to have prompts in your environment to be able to remind yourself to do that. So whether it's like putting rubber bands on your wrist of your goal of praise statements for a certain period of time, and every time you have a positive social interaction, you move one rubber band from your right hand to your left hand every time you do it. or pennies in your pocket, things like that. So we talk through a lot of strategies on, again, what are the ways that you can support your staff, and even the individuals that you support to focus more on those positive social interactions and corrections. Next slide, please. All right. There are also strategies that we talk through about how do you recognize staff. A lot of this work is about how do we rethink how we're organizing ourselves. How do we think about how to support staff in order to do something different to get a better outcome? An outcome for the people that you're supporting, but also an outcome for themselves and improved satisfaction with work, and which can help with things like retention and with staff. So here's some examples from, again, the arc of Northern Chesapeake in different ways that they have identified ways to recognize staff. The one on the left, everybody had a like an avatar, if you will, and people could post notes next to the avatar, and then a kudos board as well. And we will share numerous more examples during the training for teams. The next slide, please. Another approach and kind of the more final approach and practice associated with universal positive behavior support is proactive and function-based responding. So thinking about why a behavior occurs before responding, talking about empathy and how that can shape our responses. You can click the button again. There's a visual that appears. There you go. Thinking about those de-escalation strategies. Again, you should be thinking about all this alignment and integration. This isn't replacing what you're doing, but perhaps thinking through how can we enhance what you're engaged in within your organization. And then the next slide, please. And you can click again. There you go. Thanks. So thinking through, I talk a lot about the universal, and that is one of the first steps that we engage in. We do some concurrent work with tier 3, and I'll talk about that in a moment. When we think through tier 2, what those strategies will look like are using information and data to identify different levels of needs early on. They're typically more simple and less complex interventions, and they are definitely function-based and often pull from some mental health and wellness interventions. And then if you could click again, and again, there you go. Tier 3, like I mentioned, we do some of this work concurrently. So as you have a core team working on the universal tier 1 training, we have opportunities for some individuals within your organization to attend a series of trainings to really enhance the positive support planning that would be associated with more of this tier 3 of how do you really create comprehensive, function-based, trauma-informed, and person-centered positive support plans. And those are typically more complex assessments and definitely integrated with other positive supports, and thinking through how you're collecting data and monitoring those plans as well. So that's a concurrent element with the universal work that occurs with this training opportunity and cohort opportunity within the state during that first year. All right, the next slide. Okay, so this puts it all together in a way of, what positive behavior support can do. And again, thinking this as a framework to really enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the supports that you do provide throughout your organization. And I often equate this to kind of a grandfather clock, if you will, or like a tower clock, where the forward-facing hands that tell the time, what you can see in the front, and those, like what you can see in the front and the time moving, where you have the hands that show you what time of the day it is the triangle on your slide here. And you can see how you move around strategies and practices, and use certain strategies at tier 1 and how they can be used at tier 3, and your data help inform that. It's all the gears on those concentric circles, those things kind of behind the scenes in a clock that move the hands on the clock, that are critical in making sure that you're putting practices into place where they need to be put into place and with whom they need to be put in place. And so the outcome systems data practices that are equity centered and culturally responsive are the gears that really help move around the parts that are essential in creating these really efficient and effective systems of support in organizations, and help support really high quality implementation of effective practices. All right, the next slide. And again, if you have questions, I'm taking a look here and seeing if there are any questions or anything. If you have questions, feel free to put those in chat, and we will continue to monitor that. This work that we do with an organization-wide positive behavior support is very much team guided. And it includes a process of thinking through who that team would be within your organization. And it's organizations big and small here, of who that team would be to guide this process. This is not talking about replacing a team. It's not talking about adding a team, but perhaps thinking about your current teaming structure and how you can pull from who you already have, how you're already organized, in order to do things like go to training, develop action plans, and monitor those plans. So thinking about this team is going to be responsible for thinking about how does this content, this information align to our current training strategies, and how do we need to make modifications to those so that we can incorporate organization-wide positive behavior support, or even as we talk through some of the tier 2 and tier 3 work. The same thing for coaching and evaluation. What are we going to do? How is this team going to guide that process, and be able to take the content from training and the support that's provided from the different partners within this work, and to create an action plan and move this forward. Can you move to the next slide? And you can click, it should be twice. There you go. Membership really on these teams, we ask that team members are, there's a range of team members, because we like to see a range of voice. So including organization leadership, so folks that really can make executive decisions around resources and resource allocation, can make a commitment to this at the organization level, that there's a priority for this work. It's helpful to have program managers or a program manager as part of this team, because the program managers are going to be those individuals that are responsible for making sure that the staff on a regular basis are implementing strategies as intended. Quality assurance representation is really helpful on the team. You can see this is kind of a multidisciplinary team. Quality assurance is really helpful because you want to evaluate the work that you're doing throughout this process, so that you can celebrate your success. You have ways to communicate about the work that you're doing to different stakeholders who, it could be board members if you have a board. And also making sure that you are having the impact that you want to have. You want to also have members on this team who are really knowledgeable about patterns of behavior and functional skills. And then we also find it really helpful to have direct support professionals represented on the team as you're able to, as well as individuals represented on the teams, because there's voice for all. And one thing that I like to say is you know, having a team where, you know, everybody in our organization feels like at least their role is represented in some way is really helpful. So thinking this through, when you're interested in getting involved with this, it's thinking about, I want to assure you, it's not about creating a new team, but it's thinking about who are your existing teams, and are there ways to work with that team and maybe modify that team a bit in order to get this representation. And you know, these are things that we talk you through as you're interested in getting involved, and are happy to help answer questions and guide this process along the way. We do know that things change and leaderships change, teams change over time. So we're really just talking about your initial team. And again, we're happy to talk you through that process and help through that process along the way. All right. The next slide, please. All right. I'm going to give you a history of what this is, like positive behavior support in general in Maryland. Because I think it's helpful to know that there has been a strong and long history of engaging in positive behavior support in Maryland across multiple systems, really across the lifespan. We have the State Department of Education has been engaged with positive behavior support, but on the school side, so school-wide positive behavioral interventions and support that was initiated in 2000. And it was, again, a partnership with a state agency, MSDE. Johns Hopkins was part of that partnership, as well as Shepherd Pratt, across 24 school systems, the Manseth schools, and our Archdiocese in Baltimore. There's also a pyramid model for early childhood in the state as well. The Department of Juvenile Services has been involved with positive behavior support as well. That was initiated in 2017. And there have been versions and variations of that since then. And then Maryland DDA, you know, the work formally started in 2019. The conversation started prior to that. And so positive behavior support has been really at the has been a priority since prior to 2019, but it really took effect in 2019. Unfortunately, there was a pandemic shortly after the work began, but we'll talk you through that in a little bit. So I wanted to give you a balcony view of the long history of positive behavior support in the state of Maryland, but now I want to focus really on DDA's efforts here in the state. So if you could go to the next slide. So I'm starting to transition a bit into kind of the how to get involved and what you would be getting involved with. The Maryland Developmental Disabilities Administration began the actual activities around developing a cohort model for positive behavior support in Maryland in 2019. The original cohort, we have the ARC of Northern Chesapeake and SEEK that are still engaged with this process. Like I had mentioned, the training for this cohort one started in 2019, and we wrapped up the training in the fall of 2019 and started moving in with the technical assistance and support elements of it. And then the pandemic happened within 6 months of the teams being trained. And I think it's really a testament to how this has helped these organizations and that they're continuing on with this work. So the ARC of Northern Chesapeake region and SEEK are the initial cohort organizations that are continuing along the path of organization-wide positive behavior support. If the next slide, please. Well, actually, can you go back to the other slide? Apologize. The element here too is when the state is thinking about these cohort organizations, it's thinking about, how do we take the initial work from these first two organizations, or first handful of organizations, now two remain, and build upon that. So this is really a growth model of folding in and incorporating new organizations into this work over the next handful of years, so that there is more of a statewide element of organizations involved with this work. And as that grows, there are greater opportunities for these communities of practices, being able to pull these organizations together, or teams together, or components of those teams together, to share resources, to share stories, to share experiences, and to continue to grow. So that's the mindset here. The next slide, please. What this looks like, and this is the aim of the statewide model, is to have a series of resources, or a set of resources and experiences for organizations. And so you're joining as an organization or an agency, and you'll be in that kind of yellow third box down. And we have organizations that are interested in positive behavior support. And so the state has developed this statewide infrastructure, and that is in the blue, and that's where it starts, where there's a development of statewide training materials, resources, evaluation plans to promote the consistency of positive behavior support across the state. This is disseminated down to organizations through the partners, through the regional teams, and we have the regional folks on here as well, so who introduced themselves earlier, as well as some of the partners who then take the training materials and the resources and work with organizations and provide training, provide technical assistance, and guidance around evaluation to help support the organization implementation of this work. So there's a real partnership process here when organizations get involved, that you're getting involved not just with the training elements, but you're getting access to these regional staff as well as state partners who are here with you along the way to be able to provide coaching, technical assistance, support, and feedback as you're starting to develop your organization-wide system for positive behavior support. And at the organization-wide level, you're getting all the information, you're getting the guidance, and the role of the organization implementation team is to think about how does this work in our system? How do I tap into the resources that the state has developed, and that we have these regional contacts as well as state partners? How do I tap into those resources to help figure out what is the best way to implement this within our organization? How do we take this information and make this work with our training that we currently have? What changes do we have to make to our training? How about how we provide coaching and support to staff, and how do we evaluate these efforts? We help you through that process of developing those action plans, developing those processes. And then at the program level, so the organization team, then you're training staff within your organization. And the idea at the program level is that the program is responsible for contextualizing what this looks like. So you saw those examples from Minnesota and the Arc of Northern Chesapeake. Well, what does it look like at the universal level to have a common language? And what does our common language look like in our home? So how is it contextualized? So that's the kind of the progression of supports. And again, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the question section so that we can answer anything along the way. I'm going to conclude here with the next set of slides on how to get involved. So that was a lot about what positive behavior support is. You can move to the next slide too. This is a lot about what positive behavior support is, and then like the elements of what this looks like in the state of Maryland. And now it's a little bit of detail on how to get involved with this next cohort. And we're extremely excited to be able to really actively recruit organizations and get folks involved in this work. We're excited to get some more organizations involved. And if you can go to the next slide, we'll talk through that. You know, here's a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of what does it mean to get involved with a cohort training. And so what the DDA provides, I've kind of talked you through that last slide a bit, but is really training to your organization team, coaching and consultation along the way, opportunities for training with your own cohort, so pulling together as a cohort to have opportunities, again, developing those like communities of practices, if you will, within your cohort, and then expanding that out. And then any kind of timely access to any relevant resources and updates as they happen. What we ask organizations to be able to commit to are a few things here. So again, the active administrative leadership and involvement, so that there are decision makers at that executive leadership level who are who buy into this work and support this. That there's a team that can help coordinate your positive behavior support efforts. There is a application that will be available for you to be able to indicate interest. There's actually one readiness webinar. I apologize for that typo in there. There is one readiness webinar, and that's really an opportunity for those who submit an application and are approved for the cohort or invited into the cohort. For number 2, to be able to come together before the team training to hear a little bit more detail about positive behavior support and training, so that a few folks from each organization attend and are kind of primed before the team comes. There are 3 days of team training, and then on-site technical assistance and virtual technical assistance along the way. All right, next slide. We ask that if you are interested in this work and becoming part of the cohort, that you understand that lasting change takes time. I will quote Dr. Meg, and that this is a marathon, not a sprint. And so there's a process of, you know, what you're doing now is this exploration process. Is positive behavior support the right fit for us at the right time? And then if you decide yes, then we move forward and start talking through some of the installation elements. So going through and creating, you know, the teams and then the training, so that then you can implement the efforts and the activities. The change process is depicted as somewhat linear, but those arrows that go back and forth indicate that that things happen. You know, we had teams that were moving into the initial implementation phase before the pandemic hit during the first cohort, that then needed to go back to some of the installation and exploration as there was the recovery from the cohort. So this is, there's a lot of fluidity in this change process, but we ask that you're willing to commit for multiple years to this effort if you're interested in becoming involved with the cohort process. All right, the next slide. Thanks. So some of the steps to determine your interest is, take this back to your broader leadership and decision makers within your organization. If you are the decision makers within your organization, talk to some other folks who would be responsible for organizing this and keeping this going. Within the application, there will be some readiness information, and I'll share that with you we'll share some readiness elements in a moment. Thinking through whether you're interested in creating that positive, proactive programming throughout your organization, it just, enhancing what you're likely doing at the individual level and pulling this down to the whole organization level. Thinking through, are you looking for strategies to help with alignment of the work that you're already doing, feeling like you might have multiple initiatives? This could be a way to engage in some planning and training and consultation around alignment and integration of those strategies. And then are you looking for strategies that will help with supporting your staff with implementation of practices that you are training them on? That is constantly an area where we see teams and organizations like yourselves and others that there's a struggle of helping staff to be able to implement the strategies that are trained to a high degree of implementation. Right. So those are some of the things to think about if you're interested in the cohort model. I'm going to share some important dates that could help also shape your interest. So if you could go to the next slide, that would be great. We have some important dates here that are helpful for the next phases of this. So on August 29th, we'll have a follow-up webinar. That webinar will provide a little bit of a really brief review of what we talked about today, probably about 5 minutes or so. And then we'll talk through that application process. I have these, I'm sorry, I have these mixed up here. The August 29th is the webinar to learn a little bit more about this. And I apologize, I have the 1st and the 31st transposed on this slide. The applications are due October 1st, and the teams will be notified on October 31st. We're hoping that we're aiming for about 8 teams for the cohorts. That gives you an idea of that we're interested in growth, but we want to do growth in a small way so that we can continue to build this out throughout the state in a way that is going to help best support those teams that are coming on board. If we have 8 teams, then we are better able to provide that kind of consultation and coaching. So I apologize for the October dates being backwards here, but October 1st is the date that the applications are due. October 31st is the date that teams will be notified. And the next slide. And then some important dates here. Once teams are identified and notified on October 31st, there will be a kind of a welcome and orientation webinar. I mentioned that as like a readiness webinar a few minutes ago. And that will be on November 7th. And again, that's for the teams that have applied and have been invited to participate based on that application. There are 3 days of in-person team training that will occur. The date is still, or the dates are identified here, but the location is being determined. And that is, those will be on November 18th, November 19th, and December 11th. The first 2 days really focus a lot on the practices and the systems for organization-wide universal positive behavior support. And the December 11th date, we go through a lot of the evaluation elements that are helpful for teams to start planning so that you can be collecting information about the impact of this work that you're doing. Okay, so those are important dates to keep in mind for this cohort work. And after that, we have some additional, you know, after the elements of the training, there's ongoing support for the team. So we're available to join team meetings on a monthly basis. We can come and do visits. We talk about those logistics when we go through the training. All right. And the next slide, please. All right, so who to contact? If you have, we're leaving time for questions today so that we can answer questions that come up in real time. And I also want to let you know that you can contact the following individuals for additional questions that you might have about the cohort process. I'll also share my information towards the end of this. Terrence and Kyra and Kiana introduced themselves earlier on. Terrence is a statewide coordinator for clinical services. Kyra is the coordinator for the central region, and Kiana is the coordinator for the southern region. So feel free to reach out to those individuals with questions that you have. If you can go to the next slide. I also wanted to share, if you're looking for another way to share what positive behavior support in an organization-wide positive behavior support might look like, you can visit the apbs.org website and scroll all the way down on the home page, and there's a video, a short video that can be played and shared around what positive behavior support in the community settings looks like. Next slide. Oh, can you go to the next slide? I'm gonna skip this one. There you go. The other thing to think about too is that there are, in addition to the cohort involvement, this team for positive behavior support at the state, this partnership, has worked on and is continuing to work on additional modules around positive behavior support for staff and teams, around organization-wide positive behavior support and teaming structures around this, and more advanced tier work, so around tier 2 and tier 3. So in addition to the cohort work, this state team has really been working hard to develop some modules that can be used kind of across the board to help disseminate more information about organization-wide positive behavior support. So we're extremely excited, and those will, once they're available, they'll be announced on a broad scale. But I wanted to let you know now that they're coming, and they're coming soon. All right, next slide. And I wanted to leave about 15 minutes at the end to address any questions that have come up along the way. And so I'm gonna take a look through. I don't know.
There were two questions in the chat.
Perfect.
The first one says, does this model take into consideration how many of our DSPs are also needing the same consideration with trauma?
Yeah, and I think that came from Cindy Freeman. Thank you for asking that. Yes, that is an extremely important element of this, and one of the things that when we think through organization-wide work, we talk a lot about the fact that in order to make the changes that are going to be the most meaningful, have the most meaningful impact on the people that you support, you have to start with your staff. And we have to start thinking through, how are we supporting staff in not just providing strategies and skills for them to support individuals, but we have to take into consideration too where they're coming from, right? And so a big element of the organization-wide work is to really create these positive, predictable, consistent environments, not just for the individuals that you support, but for the staff that you have. Some of our partners in Pennsylvania, there's the foundation up there called the Devereaux Foundation, and they have they've been engaged in this work for a long time at the organization level, and they found a great impact on staff, like staff quality of life and satisfaction, as well as increased retention. And it's because you are thinking through staff needs. So that was a long answer to a short yes, right?
And I think the other question was, will these slides be available in the form of a handout to providers? I think it's in the handout section. They can download this right down the slide.
Yeah.
Yes, and I can put my email in there in case someone wants to email me.
Okay. Perfect. Karen, thank you for keeping your eye on the questions. All right. And then I'm gonna just pause for a moment to give folks a moment to answer questions or to put in any questions. So there we go.
And I just wanted to take a minute to say that if you guys have any questions and if your agencies are wondering if this is something that maybe is this something that you want to take on with all the other things going on with DDA, feel free to reach out to Terrence or myself or Kyra or Kiana and have that conversation with us, just to, ask us questions about it. Feel free to do that. We're more than willing to answer any questions you might have, or, just give you our thoughts or opinions about why we think positive behavior support through being a part of this cohort, the organizational implementation of it, why it's a great idea and how it can benefit your whole organization, just to help you make that determination if now is the time to invest in doing this or not. I mean, we're not trying to pressure anybody to do this. This isn't going to be the only cohort that we do, but it is a great opportunity. And like Jen has said, we recognize, DDA recognizes that this is a long-term investment. It is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So change takes time, and it's not that we expect to see great change happen quickly. So, if you do decide that you're going to take the jump and get involved in this, we know it's going to take some time to see some actual change happen, and that's okay. And we're going to be with you through the whole entire process. And just keep that in mind, that clinical services is not just going to, disappear. We're going to be walking through this with you step by step, and supporting you all through the journey. And just because my name's not on the who to contact doesn't mean that I'm not available, but I'm really letting Terrence and Kyra and Kiana take the reins with this. But I'm always available. You all know that.
All right. Yeah, so there are some other questions. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to also kind of piggyback off of that and illustrate. I had mentioned that we're looking at taking up to 8 organizations this year into the cohort, and the reason is for keeping that number small is so that we know that we can provide the best training and support to the organizations as you all are embarking upon this work. And the same will be said as when we talk to you as an organization. We're going to say start small, right? Start small, figure out how this fits, how this feels, and scale up from there. So we're kind of modeling and mirroring the process that we would ask organizations to do. Now, organizations come, small, medium, and large, right? And so we further help contextualize that along the way. All right. So a question came in, are all DDA behavioral service providers required to be trained in positive behavior support? I'll pass that to the DDA folks.
So as of right now, you're not required to be trained. There's not a mandate that everybody must have positive behavior supports as a, check off the box requirement. I would highly recommend that you use positive behavior supports. It's the tiered model of looking at, universal supports for everybody and then moving up the tiered levels makes sense. But there's not a mandate saying that you must be, certified in positive behavior supports at this time. But when you're looking at behavior plans and you're looking at tiered supports, it makes sense to be using positive behavior supports in that mindset.
Yeah, and I think too, to follow up with that, this is one avenue into this as well, and there are other resources that are be available. This is kind of the most concentrated way to get the positive behavior support framework within your organizations, but there will be other resources available, like the resources that I mentioned are coming soon, that if you're interested in having a broader reach of the knowledge of positive behavior support, that there will be some kind of awareness and understanding types of modules that will be available on a broader scale as well.
Right, and I think the other piece, so the nice thing about with this type of cohort training module thinking is that we've all been to trainings where it's kind of that train and hope, right? You go to a training and you hope you can implement what you just learned, but then, you get back to your organization and there's some kind of fire that you have to put out, and then all that great stuff you just learned you forgot about because you're dealing with 82 different other fires that you have to put out, and you don't have the chance to implement all the great stuff that you just learned. Where this is a nice organizational wide strategy, very systematic way of implementing things, so that some of the great things that you're going to learn you can actually implement and watch it take root and grow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and with the cohort model comes a lot of support over a few years. So it's not just directly after the training, which is nice. Good. All right, another question, and oh yeah, so I think this was already addressed, but will there be another opportunity next year? There will be additional opportunities on an annual basis to bring on more organizations as the state continues to broaden the reach of this work.
Yeah, our goal is to continue to move forward, and that was our goal back in 2019, but then the pandemic happened and the whole world shut down, and so priorities shifted, and so now we're able to refocus and move forward with these things. And part of bringing in our regional coordinators is to be able to expand the focus and the bringing in that regional technical assistance so that we'll be able to move forward and be able to expand it out, so that we'll hopefully be able to continue to have cohorts growing every year, and then be able to develop some community of practices so that cohorts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 maybe can help with developing community of practices for cohorts 10, 12, 13, 14. I'd like it to get to a point where we're all using this kind of methodology as we move forward into the future.
Perfect, great. I'm going to jump around questions a little bit. How many agencies? There are currently 2 active agencies. There are a few other agencies that have been involved, but the pandemic really was a challenge in keeping traction. So the 2 that I mentioned, we we just went through some rebooting and centering around this work. That doesn't mean that there aren't other agencies that are really highly invested in positive behavior support, but there are two cohort 1 organizations that are currently actively involved, and so this year would be the second cohort. The application itself, we don't have as a handout right now, but will be. Where is that going to go? Will it be posted on the website, and then can it be emailed out to the people who registered for this?
Yes, we can definitely email it to the people that registered for this, for the webinar for sure. And we can talk with Dr. Smalls and, you know, determine out how we can put it out for, you know, the general population.
Perfect. And then someone asked for my information, so I will put that in here in the chat, and you can see Donna Will's information as well if you have any questions for her. The other question that came up, is there an identified training program available that Maryland currently recognizes, one that could be offered to staff or one that a DSP could take or attend? I'll leave that to the state folks.
Jen, could you read that question again? I'm sorry, I just completely had a brain cramp.
No, you're fine. Is there an identified training program available that Maryland currently recognizes, one that could be offered to staff or one that a DSP could take or attend?
For positive behavior supports?
I'm going to assume for positive behavior supports, but
Okay. Right, I think that's where my brain got cramped. I was like, training for what? I'm assuming if you guys are talking about positive behavior supports, one of the things that is coming soon, like very, very, very soon, is we developed learning modules that will be going up on the website, like hopefully in the next few months. I just need to get, like, they should be up really soon. And those would be up, you guys would be able to, they would be obviously DEA approved because they'd be on our website. So that would definitely be a training option that you could use that DDA would approve of. As for other training modules, I would have to see. I don't really know of any specific that I would say, oh yes, you could use this or use that. I don't think there's anything that we've ever identified, because we've never said this, you know, you must say this. I mean, I think, you know, we can come up with some and say you can either use what we're going to put up on the website or utilize, you know, these specific ones. So we'll come up with a list when we put up what we put up on the website. We can come up with some alternatives and say, if you don't want to use what we have on the website, here are some other, you know, like if Relias has something or somebody else has something, here are some other options, so that you've got some other options as well. So stay tuned.
Yeah, and you know, it's a common question, especially at the DSP level and so the cohort involvement, we have those conversations, and we engage in that planning with cohort teams and help shape some of that content on what could be trained to DSPs. And overall, there have been curriculum in the past available for DSPs specific to positive behavior support, but more for the individual support planning elements or the individual plan elements of it, and not as much for the kind of day-to-day universal best practices to create those you know, not individualized plan specific ways of interacting with individuals, but those are a little bit dated at this point. I think the modules that are coming out from Maryland are going to be a pretty good resource for you to start with. All right, we're at 10:30, so I just want to, if you want to go to you probably end this point with a question. I think you have everybody's information in the chat or in the slides. And again, the idea is please reach out if there are any questions that you have. We're so excited to be able to start with another cohort at this point, and looking forward to applications that come in, but really just to have conversations about where interest is, and if this is an exploration process for you all. So to figuring out if this is a good fit at this time is really where you should be, and reach out to us with questions. We're really happy to have these conversations. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jen, for the presentation.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being on the call. We really appreciate all the excitement.